Everybody's read the book, Malcolm Gladwell, right? 10,000 of anything, you're an expert. So I was a venture capitalist for 28 years and I saw about 9,500 pitches, so I think I'm an expert. I'm going to cover a few things this morning, a little background on the industry. A lot of people, there's a lot of hearsay out there, but I'll tell you exactly what's going on there. The ingredients of a company, I think this is really important. Thinking straight, this is sort of the lesson of the day. Some deal considerations. I don't know if anybody here has even been close to any kind of a financing event or any kind of public market stuff or private market stuff. So I'll keep it really light. I'm not going to try to make you all VCs in 90 minutes. It took me about 20 years. Some truths about the business tonight, and then talk about the companies. So this is me. I started out Texas A&M. Good Aggie graduate in nuclear engineering in '77. I went on to MIT, got a graduate degree there. And from there I went to work for Yankee Atomic. Yankee Atomic, this is the plant I worked on, Yankee Row. Went critical in 1961, decommissioned in 1996. I was there in the late 70s when 3 Mile Island happened elsewhere, of course. But I learned a lot about the industry. I was there when all the computing codes are going from 2D to 3D, and I crawled this plant literally on my hands and knees and got all the three-dimensional information that we didn't have documented well, and then built the 3D models for the LOCA analysis, all the flow analysis, thermohydraulics, and all that stuff. It was a blast. And that plant, 85% capacity factor over its entire life. I don't know how many fuel cycles it went through, but it was a steady as she goes machine. You notice it's actually just a steel ball. It's not a huge containment system. It was built before containments were 30-foot thick cement buildings, but it was a pressurized water reactor. So after 3 Mile Island happened, the industry kind of turned over. I spent some time more in the nuclear industry. I worked at Grand Gulf Nuclear in the construction of that facility on the thermohydraulics end of it, which was also quite an interesting experience. But ultimately I wound up in California. I started with 2 little software companies that were doing software for thermohydraulics, believe it or not. It was on Apple II computers before the PC was even born that IBM put out. Ultimately I learned about venture capital, and because I was at Sun Microsystems, which was a venture-backed company, and learned a little bit about it. And one day my boss came down and said, "See, Ray, you know, you've got a good technical background, you know how to sell stuff, you need some finance and strategy, why don't you go to business school?" So I did. I went to Harvard, and when I graduated from there, I went back into venture capital in New York City in 1988, working for the Rockefeller family. So I spent 25 years at Venrock. I retired in 2013, 53 deals, 7 IPOs, 94% IRR. It's pretty good. The family appreciated it. The good news was, over my career, I ultimately became chairman of the National Venture Capital Association, which got me out and about, and I got to be more of an ambassador for the industry in Washington, which was a blast. And I was just recently elected to the board of MIT. So it's been good. Just real quick on Venrock. Venrock was founded by Lawrence Rockefeller, this fellow right here. He is the son of John D. Rockefeller II, who was, of course, the son of John D. Rockefeller, the oil magnate of Standard Oil. And Lawrence was a techno guy. I knew him for a little while before he passed away. He loved technology, and he invested in some amazing things. He invested in James McDonough, who invented the jet engine. He invested in, he bought from, believe it or not, from General Motors, a division which had airplanes in it, which became Eastern Airlines, and many, many other technology companies. In fact, he wrote a book. He was a conservationist. He wrote a book about how nuclear power was going to impact conservation in the long run. Right? This is real stuff. I've read the book. Anyway, he thought nuclear power was pretty cool. So along my career of a VC, when energy was really hot, Obama had just come to office. We were facing climate change. Nuclear power sort of rose up. Energy rose up, and I did a couple of deals, and I'll tell you about them later. So look, venture capital. What is venture? Venture capital is a very small, little tiny industry, it turns out. It's big in dollars, but small in people. But our mission as venture capitalists is to identify entrepreneurs who had world-changing ideas and to back them, sponsor them, help them bring those ideas to market. And there are many, many examples that go hundreds of years back. In fact, some people say the word venture capital was actually, or venture was written in the court's books when Columbus asked for money from Ferdinand and Isabella, wanting to come to the New World. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a good story. Anyway, so today there are about 500 firms in the U.S., about 200 billion under management. 200 billion sounds like a lot of money, but it's 0.5% of all the private equity capital in the United States. 0.5, half a percent. What do we do with that money? We allocate it, scarce capital, to many, many, many ideas. Like I said, I've seen 10,000 pitches. I only did 53. We can do the math real fast on what the probability of that is. But we also allocate human resources towards these opportunities. And venture capital is responsible for many, many things in the world. In the financial business, you tend to measure stuff with money. But if you take all the venture capital deals since about 1965, and you add up all the revenue that those companies produce, this is companies like Federal Express, Hewlett-Packard, Apple, Intel, you name it, Google, it's about 20% of the GDP, 20%. So 0.5% of the private capital of the United States generates 20% of the results of the United States. That's an enormous leverage. And then, of course, you have to have people to do all that, so about 12 million jobs. Here's just a cool little smattering that the NVCA put together. You know, all these are venture-backed companies. Many companies, people don't appreciate Federal Express being one of them that was actually venture-backed. But there's just there's thousands of companies that have been backed. And we all know the big ones. There's like 46 of the Fortune 500 companies were venture-backed. So this is a cool little illustration. When I was chair of the NVCA, venture capital was front page news in a lot of places. The Obama administration was pushing it. You know, we had gone through this 2008 crisis in finance and venture capital. So I got together with a buddy of mine, Chris DiGiorgio, at Accenture, and we put together a roadshow that included this slide. The slide will be in the pitch, and I'm not going to take through the details, but it's kind of an interesting slide because it shows the life cycle of an entrepreneur. So down here in this primordial soup of ideas, graduate studies, corporate laboratories, you name it, are people with ideas. And they're looking at what ideas they have, and they're trying to address solutions. And so occasionally, just occasionally, one of those entrepreneurs will climb out of the primordial soup up on the beach here and begin to climb the hill of taking that idea to market, raising capital, developing whatever products he needs. And if he succeeds, he might get $20,000, $50,000, just a little startup money to figure out what's going on. He gets up, he's sort of crawling, now he's walking, he gets a little more money, the idea's got some merit, he's attracted more people to it, and on and on and on, up he goes. Eventually he develops tools, and then weapons, and more weapons, and gets to the top, he's standing up, he's on top of the hill, and he's got a great company like Apple or Intel or Google. So that's sort of the life of an entrepreneur. This can take 6 to 7, maybe 10 or 15 years, just depends on what kind of company it is. There are many things, many tailwinds, as you can see here, that come to play. There's some headwinds, just gravity, getting up that hill. It's a huge headwind. But there's tailwinds like venture capitalists putting money in, there's a banking system, there's a public market, all that sort of pushes to the top. And let's say it's finished, and he transitions or she transitions out of the company and becomes another entrepreneur. As a VC over 25 years, there was one entrepreneur I backed 4 times because entrepreneurs are pretty special and you kind of want to hang with them if you can. So then they come back and they go back into the soup. These days, this is a little bit more complicated. VCs think they know this soup, they don't. Entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, they're not VCs and vice versa. But here we are, and so this goes on and on. And this actually is you're always looking for one picture to describe your business. This is it. It's a pretty good illustration of the Silicon Valley ecosystem. There are a couple of things about the Silicon Valley which I think are really important. One is that it operates on the principle of many shots on goal. So a good idea is copied very fast. You have a great idea like an Uber, you get 5 or 10 Ubers overnight. Boom. That's cool because now you've created competition. Now you've created speed. You're trying to get to market as fast as you can, and let the best company win. That's usually the lowest price for consumers. It's the best product. So the market is making a cumulative judgment. This results in about 20,000 startups a year, which is a huge number. So last year there was 58 billion deployed. This year we're already at 28, I think, something like that. It's a big number. Half of it is in Northern California, half of the investments, the companies, but 73% of the money is in Northern California. So there's been a tremendous concentration ever since the internet happened in 93 or 94. And I was in New York for 10 years and moved out here because it became impossible for me to compete against other VCs. I could not get on an airplane fast enough in New York and fly to the Silicon Valley and get a deal done. It was just crazy. Anyway, so this is just a snapshot of venture capital. The money has ebbed and flowed over time. This is the year 2000, which was absolutely crazy. When I got into business in 1988, there was $1 billion of capital, just one. In 2000, there was $103 billion. So I have looked far and wide and challenged any member that'll listen to me. Find me an industry that grows from 1 to 103 in 12 years. Nothing does. So it was kind of bad. We got a little carried away. But you can see there's a steady flow of money. This is just by stage and numbers. There's a steady flow of business. About 1,500 companies, of the 20,000, about 1,500 crawl up. So look, I think there are actually, in another little pitch I give about energy and nuclear energy and stuff, I think there are the three greatest inventions of the 20th century was the startup, the venture capital industry, and nuclear power. And fortunately, they all have come together, and a startup company really has two key parts: science and technology and invention. There's a problem to solve. The entrepreneur who has the capability to solve that problem or can attract the people and capital to do it. And then there's the money. I mean, even Disney raised venture capital. If it's going to take time to get your product to market, you got to pay the bills. You got to pay the people. And that's where the capital comes in. And so it's not cheap capital, but it's really there, and there's a lot of it. So this makes for a really interesting startup company. The average life of a startup company is about 8 years before it has a liquidity event for the investors and the entrepreneurs can get their money out. If it's successful. If it's not successful, you generally know that in about 6 months. Generally, the company needs more capital, more people that can attract them, and it slowly dies or quickly dies. And the loss rate is very high. So look, a successful startup has a compelling problem, an opportunity with a solution. So in the company, what do? You make it, you sell it, you make customers happy, step and repeat as fast as possible. And that's growth. And that's a real easy formula, but that's what we do. Whether you're making a semiconductor, you're making a web page, or you're making a nuclear reactor. That's what you got to do. The elements of the company are several: the entrepreneur, the market, the business model, financial model. Here I'm going to give you some details, so interrupt if by the way, is this interesting or is this not? I mean, I don't want to just stand up here and... So look, entrepreneurs, these are very interesting people. Like I said, they're not VCs, and VCs are not entrepreneurs. And I've been lucky enough to meet a few entrepreneurs over the years, some really good ones, some really crazy ones. But it's all about leadership. I'll just go ahead and click this in. It's all about sales. What does a CEO, what does a founder have to do? The founder has to sell people to come and work for them and to follow them. They have to, so you can make something. They have to sell investors that whatever you're making is going to be valuable and it will grow fast at the end of the day. And then at the end of the day, you got to sell a customer. So leadership, salesmanship are kind of all the same. And many of the characteristics, if you go to a sales school or a leadership school, they'll talk about these things. They're very, very similar. Of course, Steve Jobs is the quintessential entrepreneur in our life, my life, and is a very interesting guy. There's an old movie star named Groucho Marx. Everybody know who Groucho Marx was, right? Yeah. He used to say, "I wouldn't want to belong to a club that would have me." Well, that's what a real entrepreneur is. A rootin' tootin' entrepreneur is someone who's just wily enough, who just sort of lives outside the mainstream, who makes everybody happy, makes everybody mad. So this entrepreneur can usually answer some pretty good questions. And when I joined Venrock, the founder of the firm was still there. Mr. Rockefeller would come in occasionally and visit us. But there were really just two questions they asked. And he really didn't care what the technology was. He didn't care what the product, what the solution. He just had a couple questions. Can you describe for me what you want this company to look like in 5 years? And by that he means how many people, how many customers, what's the impact in the community, what do you want out of the company? It's more sort of paint me a vision, because if you can paint a vision, then you can get people and money to follow you. If you don't paint a vision, as Yogi Berra said, you come to a fork in the road, take it, right? You don't know what you're doing. You got to paint a vision out here so people will follow you. That's how you get to describe your company in 5 years, because you've got about a 5-year cycle to do things. And then who is your competition? This isn't like, Pepsi Cola stuff, but it's like, if you can describe your competition and how they're going to beat you, then you're going to know better how to make your product. It's not, like I say, it's not the specifics per se, but you got to be able to describe that sales call. You got to go out and do that sales call. And then, of course, you got to articulate the problem, the solution, and why. Why me? Why me, the entrepreneur, are going to be successful at this? And this is usually where an awful lot of due diligence occurs in the process. Of course, it's always good to go after large markets, particularly global markets. Electricity is certainly one of the biggest markets ever. Energy even bigger. Big markets attract investors, employees, and customers. We call it the law of large numbers. One of the nice things about a large market, if you miss a little bit, you don't miss the whole thing, you just miss a little bit. It has potential for rapid growth, very complicated dynamics from when you make something and then ship it and deliver it. There's all kinds of things that dictate that. Markets often contain this concept called tornadoes. There's a really great book by a guy named Jeff Moore called Crossing the Chasm. I don't know if you've read it. It came out about 15 years ago. Jeff's a consultant. It's an excellent book, and he talks about this concept. He gives you case studies of companies that hit the tornado and those that did not. It's good to hit the tornado because it will suck you up. If the market's taking your product faster than you can make it, that's a very good thing. Large markets forgive mistakes, and then the chasm. So Jeff Moore's book is a good one. This is probably a little heresy now down on Sand Hill Road, but you need to have a financial model. I mean, if I'm giving you dollars and you're giving me stock, there's numbers involved there. Yet so many companies get financed without regard to what the financial model might look like. It's really important to understand that. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's a concept called margins, right? You sell something for $1 and it costs you 50 cents to make it. There's a 50% margin right there. If it's 75 cents to make it, it's a 25% margin. Software typically has 80, 85, 90% margins. Physical things like cars and boats are like 25, 30% margins. So margins matter a lot because that's the cash that you get to keep to reinvest and keep doing things. And a lot of people don't pay much attention to it. They just assume that eyeballs will get you value. So if I have a cool web page or a cool web product, all I got to do is get a lot of eyeballs. Well, if you're not charging for it, you're going to run out of business because you're going to have to raise more venture capital. No profits, no positive cash flow. This is, like I say, a lot of web businesses ignore this because they get into the business thinking that I'm just going to sell this in 3 years and make whatever it is I can make. I was always interested, the Rockefeller family was always interested in building companies, not just products. So a big part of today's talk is about the capital and the financing strategy. I've got some slides at the end here, but look, you got to have one. One of the questions that we always ask, that you'll be asked if you try to do a company, is how much total capital will you need to raise? I mean, you do some penciling, you think, oh, I got to have 20 engineers for 2 years, I need the appropriate management layers and all that stuff. Well, that adds up to about, $10, $12 million at current market rates. Maybe you can get them for a little cheaper. So you can say, well, okay, I'm going to make the product, it'll only take me $12 million. Well, but then you got to sell it. And you have to support that, and you'll have to expand your engineering, and you'll do all this stuff. So when companies come in and they say, well, it'll take me 3 rounds of investment and $50 million, great. That's giving the whole picture. That's the strategy. And what's your strategy? We're going to go to venture capitalists who have high risk tolerance, and then venture capitalists who have less high risk tolerance, and so forth. You need a strategy. You need to be able to think it through and run the numbers. The numbers will set you free, I guarantee you. Part of the thing that happens to a lot of companies is they don't raise enough money. So I'll talk about this again later, but you raise enough money to get to a point in time when you can demonstrate to the world that you've taken risk out. You either sold something or you're just trying to prove something works. And where a lot of technology companies start, just that it works. Well, I can assure you one of the rules of venture capital is it always takes longer, it always costs more, so you have to raise not just enough money, but just enough plus some money. Varies. I actually, in a partners meeting, my early days as an associate, on Monday we would review the portfolio and review deals and what's going on, and Mr. Crisp would often say, he says, well, you know, here's a company, it's in distress, it needs more capital. He would always say, well, you know, it always takes longer and it always costs more. And I heard that over and over and over every week for years. So stupidly, one day I said, Mr. Crisp, how much money more does it take? And how much longer does it take? And the number 2 partner turned to me and said, Ray, that is a great question. Why don't you go figure that out? I went, oh man, this was the day of paper. There was no electronic records. So I went to the archives and found 150 investments they had made that were successful. And I looked at, we had all that documentation, it was very good. And I correlated it, did all the math, run the numbers, always will set you free, did the numbers, and I found out that there is a multiple by which you're over in terms of money, and that equates to time. So in those days, if someone came in and asked for, we think the total project's a $10 million project, I began to immediately use the little multiplier in my head. Anybody take a guess what the multiplier is? It's somewhere between 1 and 10. Extra dollars. If you think you need 10, how many do you actually spend before you're profitable? It's really important to have that in your brain because you're standing up in front of a bunch of partners who've got a big, deep checkbook. And you want their money, how much money are you going to ultimately want from them? It's a good thing to know. There's a natural tension between capital and valuation and dilution. If we have time, we'll do a little valuation thing for you. But valuation, what is valuation? Valuation is what does the willing buyer and the willing seller think the company is worth today? Is it worth $1 million, $10 million, $100 million? If it's an idea and there's 2 of you and all you've got slideware, is it really worth $100 million? No. Is it worth $1? No. It's somewhere between there. And it's usually a willing buyer, willing seller market thing because there's no data otherwise. The IPO, a lot of people think the IPO is the end game for a company. It's not. It's just a financing event. Usually it's essential, particularly in healthcare and any sort of capital-intensive project like an energy project. Going public is very important. That is the most hugest, largest, massive capital base out there. They pay generally a good valuation, and there's a whole system of investment bankers that know how to do that for you. So most companies, it takes 10, 11, 12 years to get to a point where you can go public on an IPO, initial public offering. But it's just another financing event. In Venrock's portfolio, a third of which was healthcare, we'd start these projects that need $200, $250, $300 million. Well, the venture guys put in the first 50 and the next 100 and a little bit more, but then you go public and you raise $500 million. One of the things that I think is very important, your mother probably taught you this in kindergarten, or maybe you're a kindergarten teacher, you're known by the company you keep. And so we call that sponsors in the business. And so from the entrepreneur's point of view, when you look out at that investor, and Venrock in this case, we were investors in Intel, Apple, DoubleClick, Checkpoint, a whole slew of other Genentech and others. But so you're looking at us thinking, well, who are these guys with? And how good are they? And what's their track record? That's how it looks. From our side, we're doing exactly the same thing. Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? What's your background? What's your resume look like? And so, believe it or not, that stuff's very important because as an investor, I will want to call people that you didn't give me their name and number, but they know you. And I'll figure that out. And it's real easy to do that on Google these days. It used to be a little harder. Before the internet, I would go and drive into the neighborhood where the CEO lived to find out what kind of world he lived in. Find out if there were cars on blocks in the driveway or whether he had some discipline about himself. I mean, it's just, you might talk to the neighbors, literally. You cold call people. You can get away with it then. Today, I'm not sure you could. And Google, of course, Google Earth makes it real easy now. You just click, and you ride down and you can drive the car right through their neighborhood. So that's kind of the elements of the deal. There's the people, the market, the product, and the financing strategy. So what are the results? What does a deal funnel look like? Well, my last year at Venrock, we took in, I don't know how many total, but there were about 25,000 serious solicitations sent to us via sources. Maybe I knew some people and they called me up, whatever. 25,000, there were only six partners that evaluated all that. 25,000 solicitations. So that would cause, if it's interesting enough to get my attention, maybe it's just literally 5 paragraphs in an email. And I had I don't know if it's a good or bad reputation, but I don't scroll on email. If you put the real meat below the scroll, I won't read it. It's got to be up top because I get a lot of email every day. We'd have 5,000 discussions. Pick up the phone, invite them in, have a conversation. That would lead to 1,500 meetings with other partners. Okay, now the project, I like the project, the people check out, the technology's interesting and defendable. I invite them in, they stand up and they give a proper pitch, 45 minutes, start to finish. Then if that goes, I have other partners in the room that are now interested. It's going well, I will deliver a proposal to the full partnership to say I would like to make this investment, and the team would come in and present to the full partnership. This is quite a formal process at some level, and it's, first impressions. This is like if you walk in and spend 20 minutes on the first slide, you're dead. If you hustle through 30 slides in 12 minutes, you're dead. This is where you get your chance to shine, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those attributes in a minute. So 40% of those 100 get the partnership to say, okay, Ray, go make a proposal, see if you can get the deal done. We make 40 proposals. We're not alone in the world. It's a very competitive world, and we may close 25 out of the 40. Meaning they will take my money and I will buy their stock, and then I become a partner with the entrepreneur, and we go to market. But there's always something. It's just amazing what can happen between when you have a handshake and a piece of paper with signatures on it and you actually do the exchange. So it's, you can see 25,000 down to 20. That's a pretty steep funnel. Now, there's 500 people that have this funnel, and that 500 across the top up there, those 25,000 tend to get into all 500. So it's a pretty interesting process. It's a labyrinth. There's no secret sauce. And that's what it is. So so we make these 20 investments. What happens? Well, 3 in 10 are bad. We miss something, or the technology just flat didn't work. That happens a lot, particularly in healthcare, because you're doing science. Some of our energy deals didn't work. We had an interesting, just by way of an energy deal, we did a wind project up in the UK. And it was going well. It was university research. They had this anchored system. It wasn't wind, sorry, it was a wave project. And they had a big piston that rode the waves in an anchored tank. And as the piston went up and down, it would turn a crank. The crank turned a turbine and made electricity. It died because the cost of steel got too expensive. The economics of the project began to fail as steel got more and more expensive. So we lost our money on that one, but we took a chance because when we started it, the economics were good. By the time we built the first prototype, the economics were not going to work. 4 in 10 come out okay. We get our money back. The entrepreneur gets a little money back. Everybody goes home happy. Maybe they go, they're on that first rung of the mountain. They come back into the primordial soup of entrepreneurs and ideas and come up with something else. So now I got a 7 that haven't worked at all. 2 in 10, they work out pretty well. These aren't career makers. These are not brand makers. These are good deals. These are small companies. Yeah, Tim.
So, I'll ask a question after you get to the
final. You think I have another one? Okay.
I can do the math.
Okay, good. Yeah, very good. But, there's 1 out of 10 that's a home run. And a home run's defined lightly as 10x or more. But generally, there's nothing, if it's 10x, it's 100x. There's nothing in between. If it's a success, it goes to the roof very fast. These are enormous returns, 100. So you can do the arithmetic. Get out your calculator or do it off the top of your head if you're that smart. If you make 10 times your money in 10 years, what's the IRR? It's pretty damn high. If you make 100 times your money, how about 1,000 times your money? Pretty good. So everybody talks these days about Google and Google was 1,800 times your money between the IPO and the first dollar. 1,800 times. Enormous return. That makes careers, that makes brands. But do you know who the biggest, most successful venture return ever was? It's probably a company no longer exists, unfortunately, and you've probably never heard of it. Digital Equipment, DEC. The biggest granddaddy of them all. Do you have any idea what that multiple was? What's that multiple? Started by Ken Olsen in 1965. The investor was the old Advanced Research Corp, ARC. It went public in, 1971, 1972. 50,000. 50,000. So you put $1 in, you get $50,000 back. Not bad. So these tend to clump together, and then there's one of these.
How many dollars were put in?
I don't know.
It's not going to be $1 though, right? It's going to be.
It's probably on the order of hundreds of thousands back in those days, which today would be like $10 million, right? So, Tim, now you have to ask a question.
Yeah, so I had two questions. I'm sure one you'll address later, boss. The primary one, that guy who you invested 4 times in, that entrepreneur you kept reinvesting in,
Yeah.
where did his ideas tend to fall on the spectrum?
He was in the security software space, and he was an executive in a company that made tokens, so that would give you a random number and you would use it to log into stuff. He came out of there, and we invested 4 times, and then 2 of them worked out well. They were in this category. The other 2 were in this category. So he never had a home run, but he did well enough. This will keep me back at somebody with another good idea. Okay. Anyway, that's a portfolio might be 50 companies, 60 companies. This is just the 10. So here's the part about, and I've had a long time to think about this, what makes companies win, what makes them fail. Obviously, you have to have a good product in a big market. But even in that situation, sometimes companies stumble. And when I look over the history, I did 53 deals at Venrock, I had 9 IPOs, I had 34 M&As, and I had 9 wipeouts. I lost it all. And now there's a few, if you do the math, there's a few left over that I'm still nurturing and trying to turn into a company right now. But when they fail for that, misalignment of interest. Remember I said a while ago something about a willing buyer and a willing seller? Well, a lot of times, even though you're willing to buy and they're willing to sell, your interests are not aligned. What if you take money from an angel investor who's really only interested in doubling their money in 2 years? And he wants to sell out. So you're out there trying to build a company that you know is going to take a decade or so, and he wants to sell out. Well, now you got a shareholder on your hand that is a problem. And believe you me, when the insiders sell their shares in your deal, it sends a signal to the new people who want your deal. They're like, what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this business? So misalignment. Employees, if they don't understand what you're doing. The number one value, I think, in any company is full transparency. You got to have full transparency in your company so that your employees know what's going on, your investors are people you know, people that know you, and then your customers, of course. They're going to depend on you to come out with the next rev of the product or whatever. Often when companies get big, they don't just sell a particular product. They sell a whole vision of how that product's going to evolve over time. You need to put your company first. I should have brought it. There's a great little book about being a CEO, and it's about a man who dreams. He falls asleep on the BART, and he dreams. And there are 4 things he dreams about his problem with his company. And the first one is putting your company first. If you put your company first, everybody notices that. If you put yourself first, everybody notices that too. And nobody wants to work in a situation where it's all about them, or it's all about someone, human being, not the company. If the company's successful, everybody's successful, not just the founder. So you need to put your company first. You need to know your customers and note your competition. So a customer simply, had one CEO once who viewed his job was sort of the reverse. His idea was, you have money, you're a customer, you have money and I want that money, so I'm going to trade you something for your money. That's how he went about it. And if he had a great product, he could convince people to give him money and let the competition be damned. Now, that was a pretty tough thing to do. It turned out to be a good company. But you gotta know your customers and you gotta know the competition. Otherwise, how do you know what to build? And believe you me, the customers are always right. If you build something that's red and they want it blue, guess what you did? You painted blue. Yeah.
So I have a question going back to the first point where you talked about alignment.
Yeah.
Are we talking okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So in terms of being able to communicate your vision clearly to your customer, there are obviously strategies you want to employ, and there's some degree of difficulty to getting that, point of communication across no matter what. But it seems to me that it's easier to communicate the advantages of a product or service when they're very tangible. In the sense like you're selling something to a company and you say, we'll install this here and it'll make this and this easier.
Yes.
But in terms of the other benefits of the product, future applications, maybe ones that your product isn't fully developed enough to realize, but could be if you get further investment, years down the road. How do you communicate those? Because those can be selling points in the present, but it's harder, it's a more abstract advantage. How do you communicate that portion of the vision in a way that's going to help you make the sale? That's
a pretty sophisticated question, and it's a good one because you got to survive. So whatever you're selling right now, I'm going to get money for. But if I really want to be a big company, I have to sell that vision of what else can this thing do, or if it evolved, how could it be used here, there, and yonder. And a lot of failed pitches on that pitch, the funnel, people just propose this and only this. It's like, well, then what? You can't sell 1 billion of these things. There's not 1 billion to be used. So being able to express those future applications, either based on your core technology or evolution of that product, is really important. So a lot of people spend 5 slides on the product and its capabilities, and funny, they rarely get to what the benefit is to you, the customer. And have you ever been in sales? If you've not been in sales, go take a sales course. Go take the IBM sales course online, whatever. There's a guy named Buck Rogers teaches it. Interesting name. Good guy. It's all about conveying value to the customer. And so there's today's value, controlling this computer screen with this little adapter thing. Then there's the future value. And so you would sell, I'm going to transform, in this case, I'll just continue on this, I'm going to transform the presentation industry. I'm going to make it easy for the presenter to get away from the computer, to not have to stand here and push the button. So I'm transforming an industry. Oh, by the way, you got to buy this product to do that. That's how you sell. I'm going to change something. I'm going to disrupt something. And so if I can get enough people to use this and to tell their friends to use this, then the industry will be disrupted. That's kind of the style that you have to do. You've got to tell a story.
And just as a follow-up to that, what happens in a case when future applications of this, some of which are applicable and beneficial and of interest to the person you're selling it to currently, but others have very real applications that do have a benefit, but it isn't necessarily in the interest of the customer directly. Perhaps it has a greater societal benefit or benefits another institution that's tangentially related.
Yeah, that'll get to the question of what kind of person are you backing? Do you want to just back a bloody-minded, greedy-oriented person, or do you want to, someone's going to change the world for the better, either not pollute more or create safety or whatever. Drugs is a great area to talk about healthcare, because we frequently get these really gory pictures of disease, and here's the solution, but oh, by the way, here's what happens to 1 million kids living below the equator, or here's what happens. And so those things are very important, and if those don't come out in the presentation, me, the investor, I'm left a little short with, what are your values? Do you really want to sell penicillin for $1,000 a dose? Like Valiant, remember this little deal in the news, right? That's not a very high value. That's not interesting to me. Oh yeah, I'll make money, but I really want to change the world. I really want to do something good. So you got to figure out how to convey that. And you do talk about, in fact, one of these in here, not just the company you keep, but the community you keep. What's the impact to families? What's the impact of your local community and so forth? But that's a spot on in alignment. If you get it misaligned, so if I sell Implosion, it's going to make a great product, but I'm out talking to investors and I'm going to change the world, that's 2 different messages, and you will get misaligned. Teamwork is the only way to win. You can't do it alone. Name me one great company that has one person. They don't exist. They're movie stars or they're quarterbacks, but they actually have a team behind them too. Time is money. Money is equity. And it's your equity, your company. How many percentage points of equity are there in any startup company? 100. 100%. There's not 105. There's not 95. And every time you sell a little bit of the company, you don't get it back. I once had a CEO sell 110% of the company. We had to unwind that one. It was an interesting way to take a little more money in, but it was bad and it didn't work. But anyway, you have 100 points. So that's why your financing strategy is really important. I'm going to do this work. I'm going to raise some money. I could get into some details, but let's say I'm going to raise $10 million and sell 20% of the company. Then I'm going to work for a couple of years, and I'm going to raise $25 million and sell 20% of the company. Now I've sold 40% of the company, but I've raised 35. The first two were different deals, right? 10 for 25%, 25 for 20%. We can do the math on that, but the idea is you need to know how much money you need so that you don't sell more than 100%. And you obviously want to keep some for yourself and keep some for your employees. So do your due diligence, especially on your investors. You can get lots of money from lots of places these days. You can get it from super angels, you can get it from the bank, you can get it from venture capitalists, you can get it from corporations. But you need to know why are they doing it? Why are they in your deal? Do they believe in that future value that you're going to do? Or are they just in it for the greed? That really matters a lot, because there will come a time when maybe what you created is valuable and there'll be somebody that wants to buy it. Some company that wants to buy your company. Is that the time to sell? Those are the kinds of questions. Those get into value, those get into your soul, and those are interesting conversations. So this is a common failing also. You need to understand where you are in life. Why are most entrepreneurs young? Well, it's because they don't have families and mortgages and kids trying to go to college. That doesn't exclude the old people from being good entrepreneurs, but it just changes their risk profile. Are you really willing to risk your house for your company? There are a lot of people that did. I mean, Federal Express is a great story. Freddie Smith took the last payroll of cash he had and went to Las Vegas and gambled it and came back with a lot of money. He got very lucky, but he gambled it all. He gambled the whole company. I'm not making this up. It's a true story. Or how about your credit cards? I have run into plenty of companies that are financing themselves off credit cards. They just float. They just keep it in your credit card. They keep maxing it out. You're going to dig such a deep hole. There's lots of places for money. So understand your personal risk. You will affect everybody in your life, even your neighbor, coming home at 3 in the morning, whatever. Of course, focus. That's the other sort of thing. A lot of people, in the business, we call it shiny fish. So one of the things we try to figure out about an entrepreneur is, do they have a tendency to chase the next shiny fish? Because, okay, I just gave you $10 million to go build one of these things and sell it and change the presentation industry. All of a sudden, someone comes out with a new computer, and you say, oh, I'm going to go chase that. Whoa. We had a deal. You were going to go build and change the presentation industry. Now you want to go change the computer industry? Well, I just wasted a bunch of money. So you lose focus. Your employees go, what's this guy up to? Your investors say, hey, you need to be replaced because we wanted to do this other thing. On and on. You create problems. So avoid the shiny fish. Pick one and stick with it. So look, the investment pitch. You need to tell a great story about the pain of the problem. This is where a little showmanship matters a lot. Even me as a partner at Venrock, when I was selling a particularly difficult deal, the risks were high, the amount of money was too much. It was kind of ill-formed, but it was a good deal. It had all the elements, but there were a few things that someone could say, I'm not buying that, we're not taking that chance, we're not doing that deal. You got to have a good story, and you got to be able to describe that vision, that future, that if we do this, guys, and if we put this money in and we stick with it and the company succeeds at milestone A, B, and C, we will have $1 billion outcome and we will change the world. That's the story you have to convey. Don't be ashamed to use props. Props are very helpful. We had one group come in with, it was interesting, a camping thing, and they actually started a fire on our conference table. It didn't burn the table. It was really quite an interesting thing. It was about heating tents and all this sort of stuff. We didn't do it. And then, you don't believe it, fire's fire. Drama is good also. When I did the Tri-Alpha deal, this was Fusion, I'll talk about it a little bit later, something the world's been chasing for a long time, and how are we possibly going to do it with venture capital? I called up the Louisville Slugger company and had them make baseball bats with Venrock Tri-Alpha home run on it, and I gave everybody a baseball bat. Stupid, irrelevant to the conversation, but it made an impression. We were all going to hit the big one. We're still in it, and it all still looks good, but a little drama helps. Don't get stuck on slide 1. Number 1 presentation mistake. 20 minutes, 1 slide, still talking about yourself. Please. I've seen people get up and leave, including myself. Know who you're pitching. These days, there is no excuse whether you're selling candy or selling equity. There's no excuse not to know who's in the room. Google can tell you everything about people. Take the time. Include the financial projections, your capital needs. After all, I am a financial guy, so I want to know that really. And here's the question you have to answer. Why should I invest? And look, at the end of the day, I have a fiduciary to my limited partners to return their capital with a multiple. I have a responsibility to the entrepreneur to help them do that as efficiently and as cheaply as possible. And so I have to understand what's my role. Why should I invest? Is it a good product? Is it a big market? If we do these things, and we do them right, even if it takes longer and it costs a little more, if we get it done, does it change things? Does it change the world? Does it create value, create a financial return? That's what you have to explain to people. I know that's a lot of gobbledygook, it sounds like, but if you think about it, just put yourself in the shoes of someone giving you $100 or $100,000 or $100 million. And I think you'll begin to appreciate, what do you have to say to them? What do they need to know to give you that? That's, let me see what's coming up next. Oh, so now I have some very specific things about deals. And I don't know if this crowd is interested in this. This is pretty technical coming up. Any questions about the process? I'll go back to here. That's not our room, by the way. It doesn't look yeah, sure.
I used to work in the city of London in business development. And
okay.
Like there's a lot of, we've all seen them, people who, just on the plane over, someone gave me a book about how to do a great talk.
Yeah.
She was really passionate about the book, and it's a cool book, and
yeah.
lots of sales techniques.
Yeah.
And
sales.
And I understand it's very effective and it's good to watch. But, I think lots of people in the room here, they came at the nuclear industry because lots of them started out as environmentalists.
Exactly.
And believe in it. And, there's like an honesty about that. There's sometimes can be a bit frustrating when you see those techniques and that sales, And I suppose my question is, there's an obvious question, what do you want to see that isn't that, but that's not the question I'm asking. What I'm going to ask is, what are you tired of seeing? What are those sales techniques? You're just like, okay, here's another story, here's another
promoter.
Yeah.
God, what am I tired of seeing? That's an interesting question. There's it's not what I'm tired of seeing, but it's a style that I'm tired of. And it's a style that doesn't listen. So you're pitching, there's maybe you and your co-founder, maybe 3 people total. Most companies have multiple founders, by the way, these days. It seems to be the way it is. And there'll be 6 partners, 6 associates, maybe there's some people on video, so there's 15 people in the room. You go to NEA down in Menlo Park, and I have 50 people in the room. So if I'm sitting up there and you ask me a question, I got to answer that right away. I can't just let it flow. I got to listen to what you're asking, because there may be a lot more implied there, and I guarantee someone else in the room is thinking. What I hate to see is when, thank you very much, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to that in a minute. Because you know what? He never gets back to it in a minute. He's on a script, he's going to go through the script, and he's going to say, give me the money. It's like, well, you didn't answer my question. So listening is very important. In sales, listening is the number 1 thing they teach you. What's your problem, buddy? Do I even have something in my suitcase here that can help you? I got to know what your problem is. Now, selling stock and getting capital is a little crystal clear about what the issue is, but you got to pay attention to what's being said and the dynamics in the room. There's always 1 or 2 people in the room that have a little more sway. If you haven't figured it out when you walked in, you're going to find out real fast who it is. Because, okay, pitch is over. Any questions? No one will say a word until the senior person asks a question. It's just human dynamics. Just, you gotta look for this stuff. You gotta, what is it you teach your kids? Self-awareness. You gotta be self-aware. And I hate it when people aren't. Because they're just, want to eat the money and get out. That's not the business I'm in as a venture capitalist. Plenty of them are, but not me. By the way, there's a great, Steve Jobs gave a commencement, I think it was 2005 at Stanford, and he talked about passion, entrepreneurial passion. It's 12 minutes, YouTube, worth it. In fact, there's also YouTube about Steve Jobs and how he talked about selling Apple, selling to the investors and stuff. They're really quite good, very informative. He's a fun guy to watch, but he's also a very smart man. So, energy financing. Energy projects are big, long-lived, but if they work, they change the world. So, I don't know if I sent a paper that I published in January in issues.org, giving a little bit of history of Tri-Alpha, but when you're building a science project like a nuclear energy project, you need milestones. The entrepreneur needs to identify what are the risks right now, what are the highest risks and the highest rewards that I can get for removing or reducing that risk before I run out of money. Because you're not going to go in and raise $500 million in day one. No one will give it to you. That's not the way the world works. But I can raise $2 or $3 or $4 or $5 million on day one. So how long does that have to last, and what is it? So you think about these milestones, and these are billboards. You put a stake in the ground and you put a sign up. We have proven that corrosion in this environment and radiation is either it is or it isn't a problem. In healthcare, it's the first thing you test is does the chemical pathway even work scientifically? That's a pretty typical approach. So in the nuclear energy space, does this new idea about physics or materials or whatever, does it work at a scientific laboratory bench level? That's usually an early milestone. You divide the project into chunks, 12 to 18 months apiece. That's about the patience of an investor. If I give you $10 million and then you burn all that money up in 18 months, you go out and raise more money. I expect you to raise that money at a higher valuation. You want to raise it at a higher valuation, so the next time you go out, you raise $25 million at a valuation higher than mine. I write a little bit of check, all's good. But you divide it into these chunks. This is kind of what's digestible by people too. If you had a three-year milestone, really is harder. Others, the ultimate milestone, it works economically and it's useful. So you always want, and remember I said a while ago, it always takes longer, it always costs more. So let's say you do the math. I need this many engineers, I need this many laboratory resources, I got to spend this much discretionary money on consumables, electricity, compute power, whatever it is. And then you put a little extra in there. I typically like to put 50% more. That could be a little heavy. Some people, if you're really confident about what you can get done in 12 months, then raise 15 months worth of capital. But it always takes longer, it always costs more. And you want to raise enough capital plus a little bit more. Remember, raising money takes time too. So you got to get your scientific results or your engineering results done, and then you can go to market with, look what I've done, look what I've proven. Your personal credibility just went up with everybody you're talking to. Me at Venrock or NEA or Kleiner Perkins or whoever it is like, yeah, boy, they did what they said they were going to do, and they did it well, and they did it efficiently. That's an important statement for the next investor. Nothing ever goes in a straight line, so you got to have contingencies. Failures do happen. Like I said, particularly in life sciences, a lot of stuff just doesn't pan out. At Tri-Alpha, we had 2.5 year what we call kitchen physics. Well, let's mix it up here. Let's turn it on here. Let's crank up the magnetic field. Let's do whatever, do something differently. And I went through a lot of, literally the physics wasn't signaling what was needed, so we set up a battery of experiments to find out what the limits of that particular element was. We called it kitchen physics. 2 years worth, 2.5 years worth. Well, we got the answers we're looking for, and then once we had it, we were on our way. So nothing ever goes straight. Something's always going to happen. That's just Mother Nature. You're always raising money. You may not be taking that money right now, but some way down the future, you are going to take more money. So practice your pitch. Practice the vocabulary. Practice that dramatic story. Practice that passion. Because, as they say, when you want to raise money is when you don't need it. But you're going to run out and you're going to need it. So if you've got the pitch down as if you don't need it, it'll go off a lot better. Pitch, 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 always. So investors, I've talked a lot about them, a little bit, different investors have different appetites. Different investors want different things out of their investments. Some have checkbooks with different capabilities. We used to joke that we were very careful not to share a deal with an investor who had deep pockets but short arms, because you just can't quite get to the bottom to get the money out. That happens a lot. A lot of people, you do a deal with a firm and that partner leaves. Now you've got to find someone else there who's got the same passion that partner had. You've got to understand the fund. Is it the end of the fund, the beginning of the fund? What's their life cycle? Can they extend it? Try alpha. So I did that deal in 2005. This is 2016, been in 11 years. Funds only last 10. So I had to go to the LPs of the fund and ask permission to run it, to do a deal, full well knowing it was going to take longer than the life of the fund. They were okay with it because of the potential outcome that we could have. So, and the other thing, if you put in your $10 million up front, or you get your $10 million, when the next guy comes along, he's going to turn to that first investor and say, so how much are you putting in this round? You're raising 25%. Well, I already got 10 in it. Look what all we did with it. Well, if you don't put more money in, you're telling me that something's wrong with the company. So you need to make sure, and look the investor say, so, okay, we're going to take your money, Series A, we're going to take your money, we're going to do this, it's going to work. Are you good for the next piece? Are you good for a portion of the next piece? You gotta sort that out. Early investors are expected to not carry the company, but to participate in the carrying of that company. Here's really technical. You ever heard of preferred stock? Anybody know what? Really? Heads are going up and down. Really? Wow. You want to give this piece of the talk? This is an interesting thing. It's not common stock, it's preferred stock, and it's got this thing called a liquidation preference, which says that, look, if things don't go so well and you sell the company for pennies on the dollar, I, the venture capital investor, get my money first, and then you get whatever's left over. And it usually comes with conversion and information privileges. This is, in early stage deals, the terms are usually pretty easy to understand, have no real impact. They have some economic value, but not much. It's those late round deals. When suddenly you're raising Series D, Series E, Series F, you're getting money from investors who don't want any downside. They want their money back. And and they're not venture capitalists, they're more like private equity people. But in the world of venture capital, you can lose all your money. It's okay. It's okay to lose money. Well, let me rephrase that. It's never okay to lose money if you don't learn things. But in the PE guys, they're going to build in all kinds of floors in their stock terms and this preferred stock that they're buying that will guarantee them a return no matter what happens to you. And you may have, if you read this stuff, Square went public earlier this year, right? And Square went public at a value less than what the last private guy paid. Well, that private guy had guarantees in his deal. And guess where he got his guarantee from? He got it from the other people in the company. So we call it he took his pound of flesh, go Shakespeare term, right? So you got to be careful. You got to make sure the risk is right. Make sure that the investors understand what the risk is so that you don't get caught in this bind where that preferred stock, which looks pretty benign in the beginning, can get very complicated and very difficult later. Okay. 3, the board. So, small boards are better than big boards. Odd numbers are better than even numbers. It's a dynamic that, it's not public company boards, these are private boards. So everybody in the room is your partner. Everybody in the room probably has given you money for your deal. So everybody wants you to win. So I guarantee there will be fights, there will be discussions, there will be disputes. But at the end of the day, you just gotta keep a clear head that they really want you to win, and to put yourself in their shoes, and they likewise should put themselves in your shoes. But everybody around that table matters, and everybody around that table wants you to win. But you should build a board like you build your product. So, an example, I'm kind of known as a product guy, product strategy person. So I'm not the sales guy. So when I go into a board, I get invited to a board, it's not because they want me for my sales expertise, they want me for my product strategy. So, but when I go to that board, I want to look around and make sure there is a sales guy in the room, or there's a finance guy in the room, or there's this, whatever the skill set is. In the nuclear energy business, I mean, I look at the, I look at the board for Tri-Alpha, and it's quite an interesting collection of people, mostly financial, but we've got 2 nuclear PhDs on the board. Dick Mazur, former chair of the NRC, Steve Specker, former CEO of GE. These guys are on the board. Now, they haven't done any nuclear engineering in a very long time, but they get the issues about building a complicated machine. Huge value, and they bring a lot to the board. Then there's Mr. Sandberg, who is purely financial. Even though he was MIT civil engineering back in 1963 or whatever, he's all finance all the time, and man, is he clever, and is he good. He's got relationships on the globe. It's building your board like you need those skills. And it changes over time too, by the way. Nothing wrong with swapping people out. Better decisions when everyone is informed. These days, it's so easy to have a conference call or go to meeting call or whatever, or cell phones driving down the highway. That's not very effective. You want people in the room, you want people focused. In the early days of cell phones, we used to have a $50 fine if you opened up your phone or opened up your computer. Because I want you to pay attention. Show up prepared. There's nothing more important than that 2 or 3 hours a month or every 2 months, however often you meet. And if they're sitting there distracted or they answer their phone, they run out of the room, it's like, why don't you just go to that meeting? I'll get someone else, who cares? It's very frustrating for early stage entrepreneurs, early stage company entrepreneurs when people don't pay attention. It's also very rude. Oh, got that on there twice. Yeah?
Just a quick question. We've got a specific thing in our team where we're looking at a board of advisors potentially having conflicts of interests with what we're trying to do. How do you deal with that?
Board of advisors rather than board of directors?
Yes.
It's a fantastic idea. It's a great idea if people can get it.
But my question is, how do you deal with, because I should imagine it's quite transferable between the board of directors and the board of advisors. How do you deal with conflicts of interests? So obviously, some of them are going to have, for whatever reason, they'll want the company to go down a certain road because it will affect other businesses. It's human nature. How do you deal with it?
Well, conflicts of interest are fine provided you disclose them. It's when you don't disclose them that's when you get in trouble. And that's when suddenly you realize there's an agenda afoot. So it's okay to have people with conflicts of interest, like I say, provided you know about it. The advisors, like in the case of Tri-Alpha, we have a science panel, quite a world distinguished science panel, 2 Nobel laureates on it, used to be 3, 1 passed away, and a bunch of Maxwell Prize winners. And so these are award-winning, globally recognized people who bring a lot. They bring questions. So one of the nice things about an advisory panel is you don't have an advisory panel to come in and answer the questions. That's why you're doing the company. But they want to ask you questions that make you think deeper. They give you warnings. Look, if you continue to go down that path, you're probably going to hit a wall because of the following blah, 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 blah. They also have a wealth of contacts. So you present a question to them and they say, boy, I don't know, but I know somebody who does. So you're kind of putting a layer of extension into the marketplace. So boards of advisors are very, very good. And depending on the company, all healthcare companies have deep advisors. They have a regulatory advisory panel. They have maybe a toxicology panel. It's very specialized sciences and stuff. It sort of depends. But they're very good.
Just letting you know, I'm not playing Mind Street here.
You're not? You're actually taking notes? Okay. It's all right. I'm checking right here. So look, I'm in 2 deals, 2 nuclear energy deals, transatomic power. I met Leslie when I was giving a talk back in the nuclear engineering department 4 or 5 years ago. And she and her partner had an idea for this reactor that would not only make power, but it would burn waste. And it was a very light analysis of it. Sounded interesting to me. I gave her some seed capital, and they refined it a little bit more. They put some more money in. We recruited a few folks to the company, and then ultimately it got to the point where we go out and raise real venture capital. So we did a professionally run founders fund, this Peter Thiel over here in San Francisco. Took an interest in it, and I brought Art in, and this is me, 56. Anyway, their mission is to build a reactor that will burn fuel in addition to making electricity economically. And we're in the early days. People argue with the 500 million in 5 years. I personally think it can be done. Heck, Yankee Row was built in 14 months. So you can actually build a reactor fast. It's the money thing I think comes into it. But we're in the early stage. It's just a concept phase. Leslie's got a lot of YouTubes out there. But this is a fun one, and the reason why I did this deal was it's a twofer. It burns waste and makes electricity. It does two value props.
When you're making the decision to fund transatomic, there's other molten salt reactors out there that tout similar things. So, in terms of values, I'm curious if you could tell me or explain sort of the thought process behind what is most important of those values, like getting to market faster just before another one is out there, being able to operate more efficiently, more economically.
This case, it was a twofer. Burns waste and makes electricity. There's not many that claim that or even propose a design to do that. They could, but they don't propose it in their thing. This is also a case where I could invest a little bit of money and own enough of the company to be interesting to me. Something like terrestrial energy that's raised lots of capital. I don't have enough capital to be a player there. Although I think their design is pretty darn interesting. I wish I had gotten involved a decade ago. But, yeah, so I got it in a stage, and by the way, I'm willing to lose it all if it just doesn't work. So, taking a huge risk. Yeah.
So I mentioned that obviously they have this idea to do two things at once.
Yeah.
And no one else has done that yet. Now, because that's kind of different and exciting, is that something that you sort of prick your ears up about?
Yeah.
You go, okay, this is,
Yeah.
okay, there are questions, but it's something a bit more catch people's attention, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I had enough for my time in the industry and the work I had done and stuff. Fast reactors, fast neutrons are just messy. They're messy in fission and they're messy in fusion. I think DT is a dead end personally.
Yeah, me too.
Personally, I just think it's a dead end. Let me go on here. Time's getting a little short. So Tri-Alpha. Everybody know this company? So, like I said, I got involved in 2005. And this company is trying to build a fusion reactor to have a PB11 fuel cycle, which is at the high end of energy requirement. 200 keV, sorry. 200 keV plasma will do it. DT is about 10. Current plasma that they have is about 1 keV. DT, as you know, spins out a 14 MeV neutron, which rips through everything, including people. This does not. There are no neutrons. It's an aneutronic reaction. There are some side reactions. As you generate X-rays, it will spin off neutrons from various things, but it's very light load. In fact, it's on the order of a teaching medical hospital with a large NMRI facility in it. This is also licensable under a whole different regime at the NRC since there are no neutrons. The NRC's, well, I won't get into that. But I can tell you what the NRC is responsible for. I studied it quite extensively before I did this deal. Anyway, so the company, we built 2 machines. The first machine just demonstrated Rothstocker's thesis, which was accelerator physics, that is spinning up large orbit particles, could contain a plasma. Just contain it. Just hold it. And they did that. And the machine was about the size of a Volkswagen bus. And so I invested in this machine and subsequently. And the goal of this machine was not only to spin up that plasma and hold it in a large orbit system, Rothstocker's thesis, but to control it, to actually hold it at will and do what you want to with it, because you're going to have to do that eventually. So we built this machine. The machine went live in 2007. Last summer, 2015, we brought the news of the science out into the world where we had in fact held the plasma for 5 milliseconds, could hold it longer if we'd had the energy. There's a lot of stored energy in something like this. And it worked. I mean, it worked. It's unbelievable. I wrote a paper that was published about the financing here that talks about milestone financing because, that machine cost about $90 million to build, cost about $50 million a year to run it with the people, the electricity, and all So you got to have a financing plan that gets you there. We've raised a total of $500 million private capital, not a single dollar from any government in the world, not a single dollar. And the science was vetted by our distinguished science panel as well as many other people at this point, and now we're moving into phase 2. Phase 2 is where we take it from 1 keV up to 10 and then 10 to 200. So the machine that we're presently building should go live next May. About a year from now, we'll actually commission it, start running experiments. One of the interesting things here about this company, the contribution to the plasma physics community is extraordinary. They've run about 40,000 experiments. 40,000. The whole world hasn't run 40,000 fusion experiments, all total. So the body of experimental knowledge that they put out there for people to study is quite extraordinary. So this is the real machine. There's a human being standing right there. You can see it's about 20 meters long. The core where the plasma stands up is about 2 meters in diameter. It's in a 60,000 square foot facility in Southern California, and it is quite an interesting project, to say the very least. And we are on our way to building the machine that will take us up energy. When we get to the DT energy, we think that there'll be a lot of people who want to use this to generate neutrons, because when you generate neutrons, you can do lots of stuff. We just want to make electricity. The $64, so the science panel has opined that they believe we will be able to take it up in energy and that we will be able to create fusion. Question is, can we do it economically, which is a really key element of any nuclear engineering project. The world will not buy another reactor for $10,000 a kilowatt. It just won't. We got to figure out how to get the price down, and it's this plus all the advanced fission stuff that has a chance. We haven't built any of them yet, and we'll know when we build one. But that's the idea. So interesting. I asked the question one day on the board. We had spun this thing up, and by the way, we're only running hydrogen plasmas right now. I just said, so do you think we could run a deuterium plasma and just see if it'll fuse, just see if it'll happen, do the math, calculate what you expect the flux will be? And we did. We split it up, created neutrons, had the perfect shape, matched our calculations. It was thrilling. I mean, it was just thrilling to be able to spin something up for 5 milliseconds and generate a flux. So look, here are some truths of life as well as venture capital. If you build a great company, people and money will follow. It's not the other way around. You build a great company and things happen great for you. You are known by the company you keep. Keep that in mind. As you grow up, I'm sure, like I say, your mother taught you that in kindergarten. Or should have. If she didn't, I'm teaching it to you now. It's really important. It's really, really important. The fish rots from the head down. This is an old Greek proverb, probably translated in many other societies. But I don't know if in companies, you can sort of see this sometimes. And unfortunately, the world has lived through WorldCom, which was a meltdown, and Enron, which is a meltdown. But truly, the fish does rot from the head down. Usually the people working on projects, they're good people, they're working hard, and when people get greed or they get the selfish and it's about me, not about the company, that's when the fish starts to rot. You can smell it, you can see it, you can hear it, the way people talk about their companies. And I've seen it too many times in venture capital. This was the commencement speech at Texas A&M. Once, 2 words, results matter. They're all engineers mostly, right? So it does matter. You gotta have an answer. You gotta get to the result. Results do matter. It matters in life, it matters in business, and it matters in science. A lot of people forget that. So we've got about 4 minutes. I have one little short story, but I just want to stop there. Any questions or so forth? Somebody hasn't asked me the ultimate question I always get asked. But yeah.
I'm going to ask.
Okay.
How far away is fusion?
Oh,
I thought you were gonna ask
you
that.
know.
I get it quite a lot, so I thought I'd ask someone
No,
else.
look, we think we'll have the 10 kilovolt plasma here in about 4 years. And so we could spin up DT. We think that's quite doable. Of course, it'll just destroy the machine.
Just an experiment, right?
Just an experiment. We think there's another 5 years to go to what we call the fusion test core. So it's about 10 years. The fusion test core will basically have a loop. There's an X-ray field on the inner wall, and they'll use some sort of heat transfer. It'll be a turbine machine. There's math and physics to suggest that if you convert, remember, a trialpha, proton plus boron creates an unstable carbon, which makes 3 alphas, which are highly charged. And if you can spin those down in a magnetic field, you get electricity. So it is possible to have a core with no moving parts making electricity. That is possible. Those experiments have been run in small scales in Japan, it turns out. That'd be a huge wet dream. I don't know when that'll happen. But that would be great. In the meantime, we're going to make steam, make electricity. Yeah, we think it's probably 2030 before we actually put a watt on the grid or hang our 4 light bulbs like they did at EBR. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
I was going to ask you a boring question about how, like, time frames of 56 look after getting investment, but I actually want to ask you, what was the question that you didn't ask?
People always ask me what's the craziest thing I ever saw. And I get perpetual motion machines often, but there's a nuclear deal. You guys will appreciate this. So some years ago, I got a proposal from a company that had been invested in by a VC. And because I'm a nuclear guy, everything came to my doorstep that was nuclear related. It still does. And someone had proposed that using a Van de Graaff generator, they could alter the radioactive half-life of transuranics. Now think about that. Is that valuable? Holy cow, yes, it's valuable, right? You eliminate nuclear waste. So I said, well, that's interesting. And one of the things that I've learned in venture is that you always want to go see it, right? I mean, that's I'm hooked. I got to go see this Van de Graaff generator. It was out here in the Bay Area. It was running in a little laboratory down in Santa Clara. And so, sure enough, he had it all set up. I ran the experiment. And we measured the decay before and after. My God, well, I'm not an experimentalist, nor am I a nuclear physicist. So I called my buddies up who were academics. I said, I've got a deal for you. Come see this thing. And so they all came out. And I watched 2 MIT experimentalists take apart this machine, bolt by bolt, solder joint by solder joint, and find the problem. It was amazing. There was some residual radiation caused by the Van de Graaff that was overloading the detector. But they were interpreting it as the americium, which is the sample, had changed its radioactive half-life. You create something that has a lot of activity, it'll hide. It'll hide a low activity thing, right? I don't know if you did that, we did. So that was a crazy one. We took it apart piece by piece, and they thanked us at the end of the day. The VC didn't lose any more money than you already put in. Also looked at cold fusion, but that was easy. That was an easy pass. Yeah.
So this question might be a little problematic, just in the sense as it might be asking you to take something very much an exception and apply it into a sort of pattern. But going back to the first half of your presentation, when you're talking about like how many get to first base versus how many make it to a home run, and that's 1 out of 10. Of that 1 out of 10, are these products or services that you're investing in that are so amazingly revolutionary that they change completely how we think about anything? Or is it perhaps the more subtle and day-to-day definition of innovation in the sense that it's a slight enhancement or modification of something how we already do it, and it just happens to fit our existing infrastructure and do it in a way that's smart enough that it gets that 1 out of 10 result?
So, not mentioned there is timing. Timing is really important. Was Google the first search company? Not by far, right? It was the 7th one, actually. And their first search engine was Yahoo's technology. They OEM'd from Yahoo so that they could get into business, so they could generate some cash flow. So timing is everything. And I've seen lots of great ideas come build a product. It kind of flatlines out. It's like it's a nice to have for the customer. And then all of a sudden something happens in the marketplace. Suddenly whatever it is you've built is really important. Everybody has to have it. My big home run was a company called Checkpoint. They do firewalls and VPNs. They came out of the Israeli military in 1991. Before the internet was the internet, before Tim Berners-Lee had created, well, he had, but it hadn't been published. The whole HTML thing, the whole concept of hooking people up. I was at Sun Microsystems for a while. We were on the UCP back in those days. There were only 60 nodes. When the internet happened, it went from 60 to 600 to 6 million, just real fast. Well, it was that dynamic of suddenly everyone was connected, and suddenly everyone needed a firewall. There were a dozen firewall companies in 1992, 1993. Several went public, some of them died. But it was good timing, it was a great product. Was Checkpoint, they had a nice little $1 million business before the internet happened. They were selling firewalls to the military. It's a great little family business. But boy, when that internet happened, it just, pattern recognition, wow. Corporations are going to start talking to each other over this thing called the internet. They need protection. They need to be able to lock that door or only open it when they want to open it. That's a firewall. So that was obvious to a lot of people. There were a lot of investors so timing does play a role. So you can have a great product, it just isn't needed, right? And then let's say disease is another area, right? Sometimes disease pathways is a huge thing. You probably read in the newspaper, genetic therapy, another category, been around as long, before I was even in venture capital. Genetic therapy had been talked about, had been tried, it failed. And it wasn't until we got this thing called CRISPR, you read about CRISPR, CRSPR, that we can manipulate enough now that we can actually create something very special. So there was always a thought that it would work. Technology didn't exist to create those things. Technology comes along, and now, of course, the New York Times says this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We'll see. But again, here was an idea, a theory, and a lot of science, but they couldn't do it. The technology did not exist. Burning up nuclear waste. I mean, that technology has existed. Maybe it was just too expensive, or maybe we just need to make electricity. I don't know. We'll see what transatomic works out to be. But that's how it goes. We're over. I'll talk as long as you want. But
quick follow-up question. If you have a company like that, say, that has a technology that doesn't necessarily fit into the marketplace yet, but they have a vision that it will someday?
Yes. That's typically what I invest in, by
Okay,
the way.
perfect. That answers my question.
Yeah. I want the entrepreneur to describe that problem out there, and it's going to be huge, and he can point to people or whatever. Yeah, if the problem is happening, chances are it's already been solved by somebody.
Yeah.
That's not a very competitive. That's a bad competitive situation to walk into.
Thank you.
So that's why telling that story is really important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Time is out. I do want to tell my story. Go ahead.
Just for like small products, how important is like a prototype
Very.
when pitching to?
Very. Never invest in software unless they've written some of it. And look at a prototype. I don't care how crude it is.
Bring it to
Physical props are huge. It's just huge.
Does transatomic power have a prototype?
No, because I'm a nuclear engineer, I could read the papers and understand it. I wish they did. Got 100 million? There once was a guy came out of the woods, and he was hungry, disheveled. He'd been walking aimlessly. He didn't have a compass, no GPS device. And he came upon a sheep herder with lots of sheep. And he says, oh my gosh. Hey man, let's see. How can I negotiate with the sheep herder and get a sheep so that I can have dinner tonight? And so he said, oh, I know what I'll do. So he goes down and he says, Mr. Sheep Herder, hi. He says, who are you? He says, not important. He says, if I can tell you how many sheep you have, will you give me one? The sheep herder says, God, who is this guy? He comes out of the woods, he's disheveled, dirty, he doesn't even speak well, for goodness sakes. He says, sure. How many sheep do I have? He says, 5,280 sheep. Oh, perfect. That's exactly how many I have. That's amazing. Deal's a deal. Take whatever animal you want. So the old guy reaches down, picks up the animal, and starts walking back up to the woods, just dreaming of the lamb sheep he's going to have. Sheep herder says, hey, come back here. He says, what do you mean? I thought the deal's a deal. I know how many sheep you have. He says, yeah. He says, if I can tell you what your vocation is, what your business is, will you give me the animal back? And the guy says, oh God, how can he possibly know that? Look at the way I look, the way I'm dressed. There must be 10,000 professions in the world. How could he possibly know what I do? He says, okay. Shook his hand and said, the deal's the deal. What do I do? He says, you're a venture capitalist. He says, a venture capitalist? How in the world? How'd you get that? He says, well, it was real easy. 5,280 sheep, and you picked up the dog. So the idea of venture capital is never to pick up the dog, but occasionally we do. So that's my story. Okay, thanks.